hand it over to Ian.
Thanks, good. Hi folks. What a frankly surprising turnout. This is terrific. Hopefully I'll say a few things that you find remotely interesting. Quite different to Anya's talk. Let's put that down to a lack of quality briefing on Jensen's part and see how we go. So an urban designer's perspective. Well, most people who work with urban designers tend to think urban designers are a bit strange. But let's just see how many of you relate to this, and we'll see if it's everyone else that's a bit weird. So what is urban design? Well, at its most fundamental level, it's configuring and managing physical space so as to influence the likelihood that certain behaviours will occur. Whether that includes things like giving people a stronger sense of attachment or make them more likely to actually care what happens on their neighbour's property, whether it's about inducing people to spend more time, which the science says equals more money spent in local centres to help keep jobs going and those local little things open and thriving rather than closing down. Reducing the probability of crime, that's probably the biggest historical driver of where urban design interventions came from. More walking, less driving, and hopefully encouraging people to slow down when they see someone in a wheelchair, not speed up. So a little bit about me. I've got a few degrees, clearly indicative of a serious personality defect. So I did my bachelor's degree in architecture. I decided that was for narcissists and didn't stay in that profession very long. Finished myself off in planning, master of architecture, master of environmental law, and what's that last one? Traffic engineering. And can I tell you, I found something incredibly valuable and relevant to what I do on a daily basis in every one of those. Which blew my mind. There were things I got out of my last degree, the traffic engineering degree, that I came out of it thinking, why are people at first level planning not taught this stuff? Because it was that transferable and basic and applicable. So I would absolutely and wholeheartedly endorse Anya's comments that it is about the transferability of skills and not seeing yourself as being in a silo. Really, no one cares about what degree or background you've got. What people care about is your aptitude and your initiative and your creativity. Anyway, member of the Planning Institute, which means I've committed myself to a code of ethics and conduct, so I basically promise not to lie. I am a member of Jensen's little club, that's why I'm allowed to be here and talk to you. I'm an independent hearings commissioner, which means I've got a certification, so councils employ me to make hard decisions for them when they don't want to make them. And so I hear evidence from the likes of yourselves, I decide who's right and wrong, for what reasons, make a call, and hopefully if it gets appealed to an even scarier person like an environment judge, they might agree. Jensen told you half of this stuff. I've been around for a little while, and yep, I get to work up and down the country. It's a lot of fun. I spend a bit of time in the Corrie Lounge, which isn't much fun. And yes, I work for myself, which is terrific. You don't want to know an absolute Scout's honour what I was wearing about 2 hours ago, because it wasn't this, because I was working out of my spare bedroom, saving overheads and paying off my mortgage a little faster. So, getting to the point, transportation. Transport at its most fundamental level is a land use, and so I've never understood why we have a culture that seems to have established such a division between thinking about what happens on our transport corridors and what happens around them, where I think they're the same. So urban designers are very concerned with the equity of space, especially public space and how it gets used. That contrasts with a lot of other traditional approaches to transport economics especially, which focus on the greatest good for the greatest number. And if you're the poor schmuck who loses, too bad, because society as a whole has won. So that does sometimes mean the urban designer is the person who comes in with some flying headbutts with other people in the room, but that's okay. How did I become the confused model I am today? Well, urban design is very much about problem solving, but spatial problem solving. And I've always found that quite fascinating and interesting. And I quite like the complexity of lots of constraints and lots of problems. It's really easy to pick a single issue and figure out what you like about it and then just try and be louder than everyone else in the room to convince them you're right. What's really hard is understanding everyone else who says you're wrong, accepting they might have a point and finding a compromise or middle ground or third option that no one's thought of before that might actually make the whole room a bit smarter and stronger. I also get bored pretty easily. And so urban design allows me to get involved in the real world discussion. Again, one of the things I sort of say a lot is that I, in 15 years, have never once had the opportunity to choose between what's wrong and what's right. Every single job I've been involved in is about choosing which wrong is right. Because unfortunately that's what living in a modern, plural, multicultural, multi-agenda democracy means. We're all equally legitimate, we all disagree with each other, and therefore no one's going to be totally happy with anything we do. Get over it. But I found urban design was an incredibly useful way that I could work through these things in a way that I got some satisfaction out of, and hopefully made a tiny, incremental, toenail discard bit of difference to the world. So, what makes a good urban designer? Clearly, pragmatism. If you're fixed in your ways, you won't be successful, because the name of the game is compromise and helping bring change about, which means changing your own views sometimes. And so one of the biggest mistakes urban designers make is getting a bit too enthusiastically onto the cycling and walking bandwagon. Sometimes in a city that's growing to 2 million people, you actually do need somewhere for trucks to go. Big interest in problem solving is a key part of it, but as I said, it's not just about problem solving to get what you want, but problem solving because you actually want to solve something with a group. Clearly you've got to have a very strong interest in spatial outcomes. That doesn't mean you need to be really good at drawing pretty pictures. To be totally frank with you, I cost too much money to waste time drawing pictures anymore. So I get paid for what's in here. And when it comes time for me drawing, clients say, no, we'd rather do it 10% cheaper and 10% faster by exploiting graduates. Which is exactly what I would do. And clearly you've got serious problems with the status quo, and think outside the square. So what are some of the things I do? And I hope it's going to get interesting real soon when I show you some projects I've worked on. Strategic transport plans, some pretty big projects, and their design, as well as the sharp end of statutory processes that we all just have to learn to love because they're not going anywhere. Getting involved with a lot of subdivision design of streets. So right now I've got a client who's involved in planning several thousand houses of immense scale in special housing areas across Auckland, and we did a fun calculation just today that the value of the roads that will be vested in the council is in the order of $580 million in terms of all the design, all the infrastructure, all the rain gardens, all the amenity, and the value of the land itself. So huge, huge stuff. And site designs, which is lots of fun as well. So some of the things I've had the privilege of being part of. This is the Seen Better Days Centre of Panmure, and this is a slice of the Auckland Manukau Eastern Transport Initiative, also known as Amity, which is a massive project, and it seems to be being redesigned every time I look at it. And I got to spend a lot of time looking at what was going on in the centre itself and the trench for the railway, and how a project that would make a north-south severance much, much worse could be leveraged off to start creating some actual improvements of that condition east-west and connecting the town back up to the mountain, which is a pretty important thing, especially for iwi, because they take their monga incredibly seriously. I was involved in a little town centre plan for a centre called Northcote and North Shore. Many of you, I'm sure, will have seen it. This is the current street. Not too nice. An extraordinary amount of carriageway for a road that doesn't come close to justifying that in terms of the number of vehicles moved, and part of a whole bunch of consultation with the community and getting traffic engineers around the idea of giving up space for non-cars, because they've got a prevailing view that they'd like to just keep it in case one day they want it. And so that was a great experience, and in the end that was a project where everyone got on board, including at the end of it even the council's die-hard traffic engineers, who had come out at the start saying, over our dead body, we've got this plan in like 2635, there might be enough cars where we need these travel lanes, but that was a fun thing. This is to do with the rail link that's on its way of maybe sort of starting going somewhere, so the council got me involved to help it figure out where the stations should go, and I was one of many people involved. I'd never try and take credit for any of these things. It's a big team effort, everything is democracy. And so there was a great deal of fun spent looking at different station configurations, not from the point of view of a typical traffic engineering consideration, but what land use development opportunities would exist if major expenditure and purchase of land is focused on a certain area, and how could it be sold back to market in a way that might give you the best land use benefits, not just in terms of improving the rubbish of what's there now, but actually making money and paying back, because the community, we're all ratepayers, or you will be one day, and it's crippling how we fund everything from roads. This was some fun I did down in Papakura, an ex-district. It's now part of the mighty Auckland. And there was a whole bunch of interest from their perspective as a council trying to understand how the future of their transport network might work. Not from a traditional functional perspective of how big the roads need to be and which roads are arterials and which roads might be locals you live on, but across all of them what the edge might be and what kind of characteristics they might have in what's described as a place function. And that was a great project as well, and it started looking at things like if there was an arterial road and there was to be no access to it, because engineers don't like friction sometimes, how one could still manufacture a condition of integration and overlooking from buildings so that people walking might feel interested or safe or otherwise. Contrast this with some work I did in Dunedin recently where, and again, God's honest truth, I promise I wouldn't lie while hitting ZPI stuff. I was involved in an application that was dealing with a road that had a 100km/h speed limit. Here is the standard curb. This is a 1.2 metre wide footpath right next to a 100k travel lane. No separation, no buffers, no nothing. Very dingy and cracked, industrial area, very minimal street lighting, deadly unsafe, and the prevailing engineering formula to assess the pedestrian amenity came out at a score of slightly good. So there is a lot of work still to be done, and if you're someone who'd like to think about making the world a better place, then transport is certainly an industry that needs it. This was a very small piece of corridor plan I was looking at on Oniwa Road on the North Shore, and we're trying to get our heads around understanding all the council's plans for massive land use intensification and growth and people living on a corridor and walking to the bus and that great stuff, and a road that is incredibly narrow and congested and stinky and smoky and smoggy, and understanding different configurations of density that the typical district plan rules didn't actually let you do anyway, that might give you different relationships with the street, whether it's about getting land to widen by default for free or doing something different. Last two examples I'll give you, then I'll move on because I'm sure you want to hear from someone else. I was part of a team that was helping the former Auckland City Council planning for the Rugby World Cup 2011. And one of the things we were charged with doing was understanding the likelihood and maximising the probability of getting people to come to Eden Park without driving or even using buses. And a big opportunity was getting people to walk. And that became a huge success story, that whole experience of walking to the games, those of you that went and were maybe sober enough at the time to slightly remember. And you'd come along Great North Road and come down Bond Street and cross New North Road and come into Sandringham Road, and you'd have to bend all the way around here and smash into all the people unloading from the trains. And we figured out that if you could just punch a hole through to the entrances around here, you could save sort of 300 or 400 metres of walking distance, which is quite a lot if you're trying to get people to walk to these things. And so we identified that would be a great thing to do. We have worked very hard with the council on substantiating the concept and building a business case and working through all the issues with neighbours. And thanks to Google Earth, there it is now. That was a fun thing that I think, in a very tiny way, actually made its own little bit of difference. And in the same project, we're dealing with Sandringham Road again and the railway station, and the problem of getting thousands of people off the train. That's easy. It's getting them back on afterwards was a massive problem. And how could we get our heads around it? And there have been options done by consultant after consultant after consultant. And our team came up with the idea of building a tunnel underneath the railway, which could be squeezed in because the council agreed to move the road 20 metres from where it used to be. That was a challenging one because the consultants who had previously done lots of options and didn't want to be seen to be looked bad said, no, it can't be done, it doesn't work, the clearances aren't there, electrification of rail, too hard with the tracks. But we kept drawing cross sections that showed it did work, and eventually, in a very revolting and modest way, there it is, which made its own quite significant contribution to the ability to suck people out after the game and not cause massive riots and looting in Kingsland. So that's a broad cross-section of some of the things I've done. It's a hell of a lot of fun. There's always something new. But I think it also has to be said to you guys that transportation is something that is very much in the public eye. And so, you know the old saying, if you put your neck on the chopping block, sometimes the guillotine will fall. So as long as you're prepared to take a bit of a hit on the chin now and then, I think it can be hugely rewarding. And I look forward to seeing a number of you, no doubt, in the future, in whatever forum that is. Whoa. All right. Thanks.